Inauguration Day in the Capitol. That means that, let me count, 121 constitutional officers will raise their right hand and swear to uphold the oath for governor, lieutenant governor, constitutional officers, members of the Assembly, members of the Senate. So it's a great day for Capitol Beat with three of my fellow Capitol reporters, Sean Johnson of Wisconsin Public Radio, Mary Spacuza, Capitol reporter for the Wisconsin State Journal, and Bob Haig, news director of Wisconsin Radio Network. Well, we've got a few inaugurations under our belt. Do you look forward to covering all the, Mary, Al McGuire used to say seashells and balloons, right? All the pomp and circumstance?
You know, some of these speeches can be tricky because it starts feeling like we're all writing the same thing. However, I think it will be interesting today to see, in light of Governor Walker mulling a presidential run, during the setup on Friday there seemed to be quite a few American flags hanging in the rotunda and on the stage. So I think it'll be interesting to watch with that in mind, of how much do we hear about the American dream and how much do we hear about reforming the nation versus reforming the state. So I think with that, I think some of the pomp will be a little bit more interesting.
The governor will
today.
be sworn in for his second term at 11 a.m., followed by the lieutenant governor, Ms. Clayfish. Bob, are we going to hear Walker the presidential candidate or Walker the governor and Kumbaya, I want to be friends?
I think that's a really interesting observation by Mary, but I wonder if, given the fact that he is, after all, being inaugurated, sworn in as governor, whether he might want to cool it a little bit on sounding too aspirational for a higher office, and maybe limit his aspirations to what he wants to do for Wisconsin in this second term.
Well, I'm intrigued by what Sean did. Out of the four of us, he's the only one that went back and looked at the inaugural speech of 2011. So, Sean, take it away.
I think it's a slightly different kind of speech than a State of the State or a budget address, which happens. The State of the State happens every year. Budget address is more of a policy speech. Here's what I'm going to do in the biggest bill that I will sign every couple of years. I think the inaugural speech for any governor is more of a chance to say, here's how I want to be remembered. Here's what I'm about. I think the inauguration speech from his first one was pretty conservative speech, and frugality and moderation in government was the theme that he came out with in that one.
But I was struck in your morning newscast, Sean, you said one thing he forgot to mention in 2011. Go ahead.
Well, there was no mention of the collective bargaining bill. The
Act
bill
10?
was going to be known as Act 10. No mention of it in the State of the State speech that came later either. I mean, that was just something that, as everyone here remembers, just one weekend, there it is. And so there was nothing like that. I think you're going to see kind of a cross between Walker telling the nation, here's what I'm about, because it sure seems like he's running for president, and then, here's how I want to be remembered.
So we have a lot of pomp and circumstance today. I mean, the governor and the Secretary of State and the lieutenant governor, the state treasurer, and the attorney general. Our new Attorney General, Brad Schimel, all will be sworn in. Then they'll hold ceremonial receptions. It's a time for families on the floor of both of the Senate and the Assembly, and photo ops, and just run forever as, leggies, new and old, hold their young children when they sign the book and all that. So is this the one kumbaya moment before we get into the real down and dirty policy?
Might be, yeah. I feel like this is the day that everybody cheers for everybody, regardless of party, and their cute little kids coming up in their dresses. And so, yeah, I don't think, Governor Walker has said he's not going to drop a bomb or not going to have an Act 10 like he did in 2011. However, as we saw from 2011, there was a Republican lawmaker circulating like 15 bills that were totally off message at 8 a.m. before the inaugural speech. And I think he got in some trouble, but it's hard to say, even if Governor Walker says, I don't want to see a right-to-work bill. I guess we'll have to wait and see whether that stays true, his prediction that this won't be as controversial, or whether Republican lawmakers want to push it.
Excuse me, Mary, we all got year-end interviews with the governor. I'm just curious, what most struck you about your year-end interview? And can I go first? I asked him, I said, you've been called the most polarizing governor in the history of Wisconsin. Are you? No, he isn't. He doesn't see himself as that. So that struck me. Sean, anything you want to remember from your interview?
I remember a couple years ago, his Department of Transportation had just come out with a budget request asking for a lot of new revenue, and talking to him in that year-end interview and him saying, there's just no appetite for that. He's still essentially saying no to a gas tax and some of the other revenue options in that DOT budget, but just a much different tone now, I thought. He's not saying there's no way we're going to find new revenue in this budget.
Right.
He's throwing out some ideas for where it might come. Just a different tone there when it comes to transportation.
He hasn't, let's follow up on transportation just a second. It intrigues me that he hasn't stopped the transportation secretary from talking about this huge package. $750 million in tax and fee increases, $550 diversion from the general fund. So if the governor is going to completely disavow what his Secretary of Transportation is going to recommend, he would have stopped, don't go to the Rotary and the Elks Clubs and keep talking about it. Sean, did you agree?
Maybe. I mean, I guess my thought when that budget came out is that, I don't know, it shows you what we would need to do to get everything that we want. I mean, the road builders and the states
and local governments
and local governments, right? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is kind of a lobbying force as we head into the session. They've definitely got some common interest there.
Counties, towns, and munis have all endorsed it.
Yeah, I mean, I still don't think that's where we're going to end up. I think it's kind of, here's what we would need to get done, and I think they're going to find another option.
I bet he bites 2/3 of that apple. Mary, what do you remember from your year-end interview?
You know, it was a very relaxed, laid-back speech. It was down in the rec room of the executive residence. I guess they were taking down Christmas decorations, but it just seemed very low-key this year, I guess. I think he was very much not wanting to make huge ripples. I asked him quite a bit about national and international stuff just because my editors were especially curious about that. And, you know, the way he was kind of dropping into issues like immigration, Cuba, things that he doesn't typically talk about as governor. One thing that he said was that he would be surprised. I asked him what he would do if Right to Work made it to his desk, because he hasn't said he would veto it, at least that I've heard. And he said that he would be surprised if it got to his desk, which was interesting to me because some lawmakers seem pretty determined to bring it up.
And just for the record, didn't he sponsor Right to Work?
He did.
Right after he was elected to the Assembly in
did.
1992 and took office in 93. Bob, did you do the year-end interview, or
I was getting over the
team?
flu, so Andrew Beckett did the year-end
Okay.
interview. I guess the question that I asked Andrew to ask the governor was, now that he's got somebody of his own party down in Springfield, is there going to be less Illinois bashing in all of his remarks to business groups around the state? And he laughed a little bit. He said, you know, it's important for Chicago and Illinois to thrive because they're part of our larger economy here, and but I wouldn't necessarily expect to see less sniping at Illinois in the coming year.
Do you look for the Lieutenant Governor Clay Fish to maybe try to raise her profile a little bit, since we apparently have a governor who will run for president? Will she try to not say I'm the heir apparent, but again try to prove that she's qualified if lightning struck and it would be President Walker? There, I've said it. What do you think?
I feel like she already has a little bit. I mean, she was featured more prominently in the last campaign. I mean, the governor was looking at presumably similar polling data to what was released publicly that said that he had an issue with women voters, and so it could have been part of the reason there. But I saw her a lot in the last campaign, and she did chair that tax roundtable that didn't make any recommendations ultimately. But that's it was a public position for her to be in, even if it didn't have any policy teeth.
And it got her in front of people all over the state.
Right, like 26 regional town hall meetings or
Raised
something.
her profile.
Well, let's talk about the other constitutional officers. We have a new Attorney General, Brad Schimmel. Any major changes from the policies of J.B. Van Hollen, do you think?
He seemed to. I would be surprised if he made tons of major changes. You know, I think he might actually be more conservative in some ways than J.B., but on the campaign, a lot of his comments were very in line with J.B.'s. So I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Okay. And we have a new state treasurer. Who is it? Let's remind the viewers. Matt
Adamczyk. Right?
Adamczyk.
Yeah.
I was afraid to mispronounce the last name.
I know.
I'll take a shot.
Okay.
Leave it to somebody in radio; they'll get it right.
And yeah, that's right. And he only has 3 or 4 people, and he says he's going to make it his mission to do away with the office, and then
Just like his predecessor.
just like his predecessor, Mr. Shula. And we do not have a new Secretary of State. We have there forever, Mr. Democrat Doug LaFollette. So that rounds out the constitutional officers. Let's talk about the Assembly. 99 members, 25 of them are newbies, 18 Republicans, 7 Democrat newbies. GOP has a bigger margin, 63-36. Here's what intrigues me. 20 of the returning Republicans got bigger victory margins than they did in 2012. Now, 2012 was a presidential year, but when you go beyond that, 29 of the Assembly Republicans and 17 Assembly Dems had no major party opposition. In other words, just third-party opposition on November 4. So you have a bunch of Assembly Republicans who I think could be feeling their oats and leading on some of these major issues like GAB and right to work and John Doe. When I bring up the Assembly, what comes to mind?
I think I agree with what we sort of alluded to earlier. This will be the high point in terms of good feelings between both sides. This is the kumbaya moment today, guys, because after this the gloves come off. And I mean, the Republicans are feeling their oats, clearly. I think the thinking is that in addition to being able to run the table with whatever the governor wants, I mean, there's clearly some serious pressure there to get something like right to work done, regardless of what the governor has said. And the governor was very pointed. I think he actually, when he met with Assembly Republicans several weeks ago, I mean, he said, please don't do this. I can't help thinking back to Tommy Thompson. If Tommy Thompson didn't want something to get to his desk, it didn't get to his desk.
It didn't get there, yeah. In fact, but one good example of that, Bob, is carry concealed weapons. Yeah. He might have supported it, and the GOP leaders wanted it, but he don't put it on my desk. Mm-hmm. So when I say Assembly, Mary, what comes to mind?
It's interesting because I remember after the 2010 conservative wave, when 2011 and Act 10 came up, it was like, wow, there are a lot of new conservative Tea Party freshmen. It was almost like the conservative Tea Party freshman caucus could have existed. Block, and it's interesting to think that this year, I don't think it's quite sunk in, but this year it's actually a larger and probably even more conservative block. So, and you don't have in the Senate, you don't have Senator Ellis, you don't have Senator Schultz now to block that from passing the Senate. So I think for the Assembly, it'll be interesting to see how many bills don't die in the Senate.
Sean, your thought on the Assembly?
I just think not only I think especially the Assembly that sort of that institutional memory is gone.
Erased.
Basically, yeah, there are just a handful of lawmakers now that have been there for a long time that have seen, stuff like power change hands and been through cycles. It's kind of gone now, and so we'll see. Second
term for Speaker Voss. It intrigues me that, let me get this right, potential changes on GAB, his point person is going to be Representative Dean Knudsen of River Falls. Potential changes on John Doe will be Representative Dave Craig. And potential changes on right to work, Coinga and Cappinga. So he has, by in essence appointing point person, says, Senate, Governor, we're going to reserve the right to take the first position on these issues and, in essence, make you, Senate and Governor, respond to some of these issues. I just find that very intriguing. This is, he's a pretty aggressive speaker, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he really is.
Yeah, I mean, they laid out their agenda before the election.
Before the election, which just struck me. And then...
why wait?
Why wait? Right. The Senate, GOP, 1814 control. Is Senator Grothman still a member, or has he resigned?
I think his resignation went effective January 3rd.
Okay.
And his inauguration is January 6th, so he's going to be congressman.
Okay. So 1814, but the Grothman seat's generally considered safe. And then you have this additional intrigue. The Assistant Majority Leader, Paul Farrow, is going to be on the April election to be Waukesha County Executive, but that's also considered a safe seat. So is there any loss? Well, here's my question. Is that another reason why the Assembly is going to take a lead on some of these issues, because there's going to be maybe two Senate vacancies?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think the intrigue also is, with the Grothman seat empty, those moderate Republicans who might be able to, with the full majority, might not be able to stop anything. Now they have a little bit more power. Yeah. And so then, sure you fill the Grothman seat, but potentially then you have an empty seat for Farrow coming soon after that.
And former State Representative Dewey Strobel is running for Grothman's seat, and he's an arch conservative, right?
Yeah, he's pretty conservative.
Yeah. And then is Mr. Cappinga, is he running for, State Representative Cappinga running for Farrow's seat? Is he?
That I couldn't tell you.
Okay. And then we have one new state senator, Devin, pronounce it, Radio Man, LeMahieu.
LeMahieu.
Thank you. And we have the first woman president, Mary Lozick. So what do you look for out of the Senate? Will it be responding to the Assembly, or are they going to take the initiative? Fitzgerald said we're potentially going to take the initiative on right to work, but Patrick Marley reported in the Journal Sentinel that people like Terry Moulton now are saying, well, I'm not so sure how I feel about that. So when I say Senate, what comes to mind? Sean, your turn.
Just whole new dynamic in state government. I mean, the Senate had all these, maybe not lifelong, but pretty near long-serving
Schultz,
senator.
Jauch,
Ellis, and they knew how to slow things down if they didn't like it, and that's gone. Now you kind of have the conservative alt-art team over there in a way. I mean, Steve Nass, Frank Lissay, people that have made a name for themselves have all found their way to the Senate, where they have more power now. We'll see what that brings us. Steve Nass, was occasionally a thorn in the side of leadership in the Assembly, where he was just one vote of many, but he's got more importance now in the Senate.
Also thorn in the side of UW's system.
Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah.
Mary, when Senate?
Yeah, I think change of guard. I mean, to have the institutional knowledge of Ellis and Schultz out the door, and Jauch and Cullen, and to have these newer members, and a lot of them quite conservative, I think it'll be a very different Senate. And obviously without Ellis leading, it might be a different tone too. So we'll see.
You're nodding your head in agreement,
Look
Mr.
for a
Haig?
lot less joviality in the Senate in this coming session. I mean, when we're talking about Mike Ellis and Senator Cullen and Senator Jauch, these were, and I think by virtue of their longevity and the fact that they all knew one another fairly well, Mike Ellis had a way of defusing often potentially unpleasant exchanges with just a joke or an aside. We're not going to see that in this coming session because, frankly, the members that we're with now, I just don't see that there's going to be the potential for that.
Well, Senator Lozick is the first woman president. Will she preside in a way in the tradition of Ellis, and before that Risser, and before that Rood, and before that Senator Allen, let's say? So what's your read on a first woman president? Mary?
I guess we'll have to wait and see. She can be a very nice person one-on-one. I don't see her necessarily cracking jokes and making a side and side splitting everybody. So I guess I'll just have to wait, and maybe I'll be surprised, but I don't see her having the whole floor in stitches over some little
11 of the 32 senators since Senator Grothman's seat is vacant are now women, and half of the 14 Democrats are women. Does that mean that, well, let's ask it this way. Senator Schilling is a Democratic leader versus Senator Larson. What are your impressions? Different style?
I don't anticipate that she will be that much different in style from Senator Larson. I think she clearly knows what sorts of points she wants to make on behalf of the minority, as Senator Larson did. I don't expect that in terms of style she's going to be significantly different. Any more or less combative or argumentative. I wouldn't anticipate that.
Do you think Senate Democrats will be more unified under Senator Schilling? Remember, Senator Erpenbach and Senator Taylor initially refused to go to some of those caucuses under former Senate Democratic leader Larson. Are we going to see more unity out of Senate Democrats?
Possibly. You know, it does seem like they really made an effort this time to just try to be unified and not have a divisive election. And when Larson, stepped aside and threw his support behind Schilling, and we haven't seen the public sniping that we did with Larson in charge, with Taylor, Erpenbach, Jauch. Clearly, we're not happy with how he was elected and his leadership. So, I think it would certainly help them to be more unified and to not be fighting with each other, since they've got an uphill battle anyway.
What do you think, Sean?
I think they seem more unified already. There was some bad blood after the leadership elections last go around, with the way that everything shook out, the way that votes were secured between Larson and Erpenbach. I didn't get any sense of that after this one. I think they start this session knowing they got a pretty serious task ahead of them, and that is to add seats on a Republican map. And I just get the sense that they kind of put that behind them. I mean, they never, lawmakers never forget anything.
That's
right?
True.
But it just seems like they are willing to move past that.
Okay. Well, let's look ahead this week. So we get past the food and the pomp and circumstance, and then on Tuesday up in Wausau, Supreme Court Justice Ann Walsh Bradley announces her re-elect. She's announcing it in her hometown. Her opponent is Rock County Judge James Daly. So how is that perceived? What's the early line on that? Is it truly liberal versus conservative?
I honestly, I don't know enough about Daley.
Okay.
I presume that he is the
which is telling.
candidate. Conservatives lining up behind him,
right.
So I imagine he will, I imagine he'll say the right things.
Were you surprised J.B. Van Hollen passed on running against Ann Walsh Bradley?
Not for this race, no.
Why?
She's still an incumbent Supreme Court justice. I know Louis Butler lost, and so that, the idea that you can't beat an incumbent is kind of out the window, but she's been around, and you're going to have an open seat probably coming up soon with Justice Crooks.
Right, in 2016.
If Van Hollen wanted to run, I would think that'd be more of a sure thing. This is, more up in the air, I think.
Okay. Any PSs on that? And then on Wednesday, the Assembly debates rules. I don't know how much research you've done, but now one of those rules says if the elapsed time, the agreed-to time for debate has expired, one member can move tabling of all pending amendments. So are we going to go from Monday smiles and have some cake and take a picture of my kids to just down and dirty in the Assembly over the rules? What do you think, Bob?
The gloves are going to come off. I wouldn't be surprised if that's exactly what we're going to be looking forward to in the Assembly this session.
Okay. Although the Speaker's office says this is kind of codifying what we agreed to 2 years ago with the Assembly Democrats.
But it's codifying it. Before it was a gentleman's agreement between Peter Barca and Robin Voss.
Right.
Say, look, this is what we're going to shoot for. We're not going to put it in the rules, but this is what we're going to try for, and we're going to keep a relationship doors open, and we're going to make this happen. Once you put it in the rules, and it's kind of like saying, we're just going to do it.
Yep.
And so that's why I wonder if, probably it'll be a kumbaya inauguration today. But I remember way back in 2005, then Minority Leader Jim Cruiser was basically, they were at the low point for seats under Cruiser, and he chose that inauguration to really rip into then Speaker John Gard. Peter Barca is a different guy than Jim Cruiser, but you see a rule change like this coming out, gives the Speaker more power on the Rules Committee.
Yep.
You
It
know,
does.
I think you're going to
Two
see
more seats
fireworks
on the Rules
pretty
Committee
soon.
for Republicans.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Have you done any work on the rules change in the Assembly,
Just
Mary?
reading over it, and I guess my thought is the Democrats already have so little power with the just sheer numbers that really some of the only power they have is being able to talk on the floor and being able to, you know, all have their say. And if there's something constricting that, it's like, I mean, I think they might push back a little and say, like, this is the only power that we have is being able to talk, and if you're going to take that away from us, like, you know, it's just going to be completely just a total railroading. So
we all agree that one of the big challenges facing Democratic leader in the Senate, Schilling, and Representative Barca in the Assembly, is crafting a message, laying the groundwork for the 2016 elections, right? And that's really going to, how can they separate themselves? Because as you said, Mary, 63-36 in the Assembly is really tough. Mm-hmm. And probably 1914 in the Senate doesn't give them anything but the power of their rhetoric and to cast a vision. Any thoughts on how they do that, Bob?
It's pushing a boulder uphill. It really is. I mean, I've thought about this. Where are the Democrats in the state right now? I mean, what is the message? We've gone through the recall, where, of course, obviously there was a very strong message. We're not this divisive governor. We're about something more inclusive. But I mean, that only gets you so far. And as we noted with the all the unopposed legislators, again, the way the districts are configured, it makes it really challenging to come up with people who are even going to run against incumbents.
Let's circle back to that. 29 Assembly Republicans had no Democratic opposition, only third party, or they were unopposed. 17 of the 33 Assembly Democrats, same thing, no Republican opposition, or they were unopposed.
Redistricting.
Redistricting.
It's
exactly.
I mean, it's gotten to the point where conservative districts are so conservative and liberal districts are so liberal that I think a lot of a lot of Republicans or a lot of Democrats looked at them and thought, like, well, that's a no-win. You know, why am I going to run in a district? And probably it's easier to move to, you know, if you really want to run, to move someplace where you have a shot at getting elected.
In 4 Assembly districts that were open, there were no incumbent, just the Republicans ran. You know, the Cody Horlacher and the Laumans, things like that. Anyway, we're about out of time. Let's look ahead. After this week, oath of office and the fight over rules, then do we know yet when the governor's going to give the State of the State, which is the next major address?
I believe it's likely, I think it's going to be in mid-January, and the date that I've heard floated, although it's not official, is January 13th. Don't hold me to that.
Understand.
But I think that's what I've been, kind of the rumors I've been hearing.
Okay. And then how much after that does he formally present the real heart of his goals for the second term in the budget? A couple weeks after that? Right? Is that what you're hearing, Sean?
Yeah, every indication is that it's going to be boom, boom, boom. You know, we're going to go inauguration, State of the State, budget. He wants to get this thing moving.
Okay. Well, let's wrap up the show this way. What's going to be the most intriguing thing for you in the first 2 or 3 months of this session? Bob?
Watching to see what happens with right to work and how quickly it happens.
Right to work. Okay. Mary?
I think right to work, and I think how much the governor can control the message and push forward his budget without getting tons of pushback from Republicans who obviously have strong majorities and want to flex their muscle too.
John?
Yeah, right to work. The
Really?
delicate dance of will they or won't they, and if they do, how are they going to do it, and, you know, yeah.
I'm going to go the other way.
Okay.
I'm going to go the bong clank of the budget. How are you going to pay some money for transportation and health care? I mean, you're looking at a $700 million or $760 million up over 2 years GPR to continue MA, and school aids. Will there be more money for schools? So, and do the regions get this additional $95 million they say they need to live with the freeze? So I'm a bong clank guy on the budget. But anyway, it's going to be fun, isn't it?
So much fun.
Get some
So much
sleep.
fun. Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Bob. That's Capitol Beat. Thank you.
Thanks.